former British Prime Minister Tony Blair. You know, let me ask you a question. You made a very controversial decision back in the day to invade Iraq because you and President Bush said that there were weapons of mass destruction there, etc. And we then later found out there was no such thing, and yet you still defend that position. Why do you still defend it? We know it was a mistake.
Well, I mean, obviously I don't think so. I mean, the important thing is to realize that Saddam actually used chemical weapons against his own people. There were hundreds of thousands of people that died in Iraq. Now, we know from the people we sent in after the war that he still had those ambitions, both in nuclear and chemical weapons. And I took the decision really after September the 11th that we should be shoulder to shoulder with America, that this threat that we faced from this terrorism was intense and difficult and profound, and that we had therefore to change our attitude towards countries like Iraq who were in breach of United Nations resolutions. So I took that decision then. It was the most difficult decision I took as a leader. And, you know, I never disrespected someone who took an opposite point of view.
Right. But you said, though, that even if you had known that there were no weapons of mass destruction in Iraq, you still would have wanted to invade. So I think that's a little hard for people to understand.
Yeah, let me explain why. Because the question is, was he a threat? You know, did he threaten our security? And when you look back at what he did, and when you analyze what he would have done had we left him there, then I believe we were justified in thinking he was a threat.
But there are others in the world like that. I mean, we could just be bombing everybody if that's the premise.
But you might want to do it with Iran.
Yeah, well, I think with Iran, frankly, I don't believe they should acquire nuclear weapons capability.
They should not.
No, and I think it would be very dangerous if they did. And I think the problem is, look, the toughest thing, because I'm out in the Middle East a lot of the time, and I'm seeing what's happening in the world. And sometimes people say to me, perfectly naturally, they say, look, you should never have bothered with Iraq, you should have concentrated on Afghanistan. And then someone else says, well, actually, it's Pakistan. And then someone else says, well, look at Iran. To which I would say you could add Yemen, Somalia. Well, you could list a whole range of countries. Now, my point is very, very simple. Unfortunately, this extremism that is based on a perversion of Islam but is there is a global phenomenon. And if you don't stand up to it and fight it...
You're going to go, you've talked about military action in Iran, which a lot of people in this country are very sick of. Are you saying that we should then have military action against Iran and Yemen and...
No, but what I am saying is, if Iran acquires nuclear weapons capability, that will destabilize the whole of the Middle East region.
And we should invade?
And, well, I hope that we can solve this peacefully, through sanctions, through diplomacy, through putting pressure from neighboring countries on Iran.
And
if not, I don't think you can take the military option off the table, I'm afraid.
What about in terms of, I mean, Secretary of State Hillary Clinton said, I believe it was last week, that our increased debt then poses a threat to our own national defense and security. Do you agree with that? I mean, as we're increasing debt here in our country, when you look at it and you say, okay, you increase your debt, you're not able to defend yourself and protect as we normally should.
Well, you've got to sort out, I mean, you've got the problem that we have back in the UK or countries in Europe have, and we've got to sort our deficit out. But I'm afraid the toughest thing about politics today is the decisions are there, they are difficult, and they don't come, you know, one by one. You know, in other words, you can say, look, concentrate on the economy and stop worrying about Iran. Unfortunately, both are in the in trade.
Right. I got to ask you about, you went to Dublin to promote your book, They Booed You. Yeah. You cancelled...
some.
Okay. You cancelled an appearance in London. There are people who are still with you, but there are people who are very, very angry with you. Does it hurt you?
Yes, sometimes it does. But in the end, you know, if you want to come in and take these positions of political leadership, you've got to be prepared to wear that criticism. And sometimes I see the criticism your politicians are subject to here. And, you know, my wife used to have a very, very simple thing, because sometimes I used to go and I'd have the papers on the table and I go back home and I say, it's so unfair what these people are saying about me. And she used to say, stop whinging. It's voluntary. No one asked you to do the job. It's a privilege to do it, so get back out there and get fighting.
You've been married for 30 years to Sherry?
Yeah.
30 years.
Well,
We're also surprised. There's only one of us on this program who's still married.
Oh, my goodness.
I'm so surprised.
Yeah, no, it's 30 years.
Good advice.
Yeah, but I was lucky, really. And, you know, if you find someone who is a partner for life, then you're lucky.
And it hasn't been easy, you know, to be married and have to have your husband go through some of the things that you've gone through. That's not easy.
Yeah, but she's still making more money. Go ahead.
But I don't feel inadequate about it, okay?
We're very appreciative of you coming on with us. You've been a good sport, and we wish you well, especially in your Middle East discussions. We hope that it can make a difference. So our thanks to former British Prime Minister Tony Blair. We'll be right back.